Hi everybody, and welcome to the March 2013 edition of the Haunted Earth Show, presented and brought to you by your host, myself, Chris Halton. As we're all aware, February hasn't been much of a month as far as the weather. We've suffered snow, ice, rain, below freezing conditions, which sadly has extended itself into the month of March. And of course, I'm afraid when going out into the great unknown and the weather conditions are, shall we say, less than advantageous, it can certainly add an edge to your night's paranormal investigations, particularly so if you're trudging through a field in a force-9 gale or a heavy rainstorm, or worse. So really, February has been a bit of a damp squib, or should I say a frozen sausage. But in March we have had one or two pleasant days, and so I've been able to get out and about and shoot material to share with you, which ranges of course from a daylight investigation to a visit to a very actively haunted location, and of course more importantly the continuance of cat EVP and other anomalous activity at my own very haunted home. Last month I shared with you some more videotape from the Art Deco room, sharing with you more cat EVP which has been recorded on camcorders here for a while. I think that since my cat Shelley died and passed over 2 years ago, it's heightened already existing activity, because there has always been another cat here haunting the house. And I have shared the story, but quickly I have met the cat on one occasion on the landing, and she was sat, and I say she because she was a tortoiseshell and we don't have male tortoiseshell cats. She was sat there staring at my two cats, who, when alarmed by my presence, scattered. My two ran downstairs, but the interesting point was the ghost cat walked into a spare room through a closed door. So to see solid mass pass through solid mass is quite interesting and frustrating, particularly on that occasion as I didn't have a camcorder with me. However, I digress. The activity appears to have moved from the Art Deco room into the master bedroom, and as always, here is my continuing investigation of my home and sharing with you this particular experience. Any friendly spirits of this house, could you come to this room please? There's a bit of activity in here tonight. Camera's gone out of focus, and I saw something move across the carpet. Having moved to the corner of the room, I sat there silently for a few minutes, but after I've opened up, you'll notice that immediately you'll hear a purr captured on camcorder, which gradually increased during the time that I was there. Any friendly spirits of this house, could you come to this room please, and could you show yourself? Please don't be afraid or be annoyed. I just wish to make friendly contact with you. As I have been doing for the last few years, you know who I am, and you know why I'm doing this. feel something in this room. I feel someone here. Wow, thank you. That was, I believe, 2 orbs on the ceiling, but not in the second picture. That's better. Okay, I've decided now to call it a day, and let's hope we've got something to share. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to the spirits of this house. I hope you enjoyed that. The activity, perhaps it wasn't as intense on the noise factor as last month's, but it's a useful indicator to show that spirit can travel anywhere, and particularly so within the confines of my own home. I'll obviously continue with these investigations and will of course share with you any further or fresh activity. And talking about activity, before we move to our main feature, a few years ago I shared with you a video I made about the legend of Borley Rectory, and as many of you know, Borley Rectory disappeared years ago. But of course that doesn't stop the reputation, the, should we say, notorious reputation for Borley Rectory continuing, and of course an army of paranormal investigators who frequently visit the Borley Church site. Now, I actually went there the other day during the daytime to touch base on some of the ghostly stories attached to the church, and there are literally hundreds of stories, and perhaps I would say probably reaching a period of heightened activity during the Harry Price investigations at the rectory, which obviously then places a question mark. Is the activity genuine, or is it just hyped up nonsense created and fabricated by Harry Price? Because these are some of the allegations levelled at him over Borley Rectory. But what is useful to know is that Harry Price never investigated Borley Church. And on that note, here is this month's special from Borley Church. Have I got a special treat for you today? For today I'm visiting Borley Church behind me, which was built in the 12th century, and what many people don't realise is that Borley Church is perhaps a lot more active on the spiritual sense than Borley Rectory could ever hope to attain during the heady days of Harry Price, the ghost hunter. And I'm going to share with you some of the stories attached to this fantastic building. One wonders why the great and intrepid ghost hunter Harry Price never actually investigated Borley Church. For sure, thorough investigations were carried out within the rectory, and also some, shall we say, questionable activities were reported, but no thorough investigation by him or any of his staff were carried out inside the church. And yet in 1942, the Reverend A.C. Henning reported that objects inside the church were being displaced and moved around. But for some reason, Harry Price decided not to go into the church to carry out a further investigation. In 1892, the Reverend Henry Ball also complained of tapping noises and objects being moved around inside the church. And of course, once the rectory was finally destroyed and buried, many presumed that the spiritual presences which inhabited the rectory had actually moved across the road and had, shall we say, taken up residence inside the church. Here I'm walking along the actual church path where so many people have heard so many footsteps of unseen bodies. And certainly it continued further in the year of 1947. A gentleman who bought a cottage attached to the churchyard reported that he could hear people indeed walking along the church path at different times, day and night, and of course there was nobody there. And in 1949, a lady by the name of Suzanne Woodruff was actually visiting the church on a cold February afternoon, when she too, walking along this very same footpath, could hear footsteps behind her. But then she was overcome by the most amazing and most nauseating smell. Could it have been vomit, or could, as she described it, have been embalming fluid? But she said the smell rank so foully, it could have been, in fact, a rotten human corpse. Or perhaps it could have been the smell of vomit. And I will pass you over to my friend Tim, who will give you his own personal experience of that. Tim, what happened to you a bit earlier today?
Well, we were just setting up here, and I was just stood just to the left where I am now, and just got this waft of it was like somebody had vomited on the floor by the bushes here, but having a little look around, there's no signs of any vomit or anything on the ground. It was just a sense of sickly smell that came and passed away within half a minute.
Could that have been, as that lady described, something like embalmer's fluid? Or whether you've experienced it or not, I don't know.
Yeah, it could have been. I mean, I've not personally experienced embalming fluid, but I mean, it could have been something like that. But it made me think somebody had been sick behind the bush, and having a look, they haven't.
Well, that is strange. We've only been here less than an hour, and already some odd things are happening. And this is during the daytime. This isn't at night, and I don't think it's necessary for people to come here late at night, because all they're going to do is cause a nuisance here. A visit during the day certainly suffices for me, and no doubt a lot of other people who have picked up interesting phenomena at this church. And yet, on the subject of strange aromas, there is another tale to tell of a Mr. Clinton Tweed of Cambridge who visited the church, but his experience of the smell wasn't as though it smelt like embalming fluid. In fact, he felt it smelt like incense being burnt. Now, of course, a lot of people would argue that perhaps it was a windy day and perhaps someone was burning a bonfire, because he did describe the smell as being something like a bonfire of incense, and perhaps it was a smell from a fire that had wafted in across the fields. But how does that experience relate to the other reports of strange smells within the churchyard? So I don't think necessarily that story could be discounted, but it's something which could be added to the rich history of this very ancient site. Strangely, in June 1947, Harry Price was invited by the Reverend Henning and his wife to attend the church. It was a rededication service to the Waldegrave tomb, which had been recently restored. Whilst they were inside the church, all of a sudden and from nowhere, the sound of birds screeching. And that was accompanied by the sound of footsteps on the path leading to the church. Again they investigated, and there was no trace and no cause for the birds to be screeching. Apparently, one of the most chilling tales occurred on the 15th of September of 1947, when a Mr. John May cycled down one evening from Bury St Edmunds to Borley Church, arriving around 10:30. He went into the church and sat in the porch when he was startled to hear the sound of the actual church gate being clicked open, and that was followed again by footsteps which came closer and closer and closer until they eventually arrived at the church, and then there was nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. And the history of this building seems to relate very self-determinedly to two main focused areas of activity, which is the clicking or the tapping of the tomb and the gate, and also the footsteps on the path leading to the church. I can attest to part of this. I came here a few years ago in the depths of winter, I think it was New Year's Day, where I carried out an impromptu investigation of wandering around the churchyard, and I was more than confident that I was being followed around. I could definitely hear footsteps behind me, and that seems to be one of the phenomena of this particular site. The real issue with Borley Church is that people will attend these locations to carry out their own investigations, and of course when these people arrive at these beautiful locations, there's normally other cars of ghost hunters. They end up making a commotion, nobody investigates the paranormal, the police are called, and it causes a lot of bad feeling between the people that live in the village and those who are attending this supposed investigation. And today, when visiting Borley, you'll find that all the street signs leading towards the village have all been removed, and you only actually find out you're in Borley literally as you drive into the village. And of course it's further encumbered by the fact that there is nowhere to park. We had grave difficulty, excuse the pun, in parking today. We had to actually park the vehicle partly out onto the road by the entrance to the car park, which was chained off. And another important feature, and I support this 100%, is that the church is covered by CCTV as a result of vandalism caused by some supposed ghost hunters. So there is an interesting history attached to a wonderful building, but unfortunately the likelihood, certainly in recent times, of it being investigated is fairly remote. And so we have to rely back to a film made in the 1970s by the BBC, who carried out their own investigation, and here is the actual clip of that investigation.
So we're in and listen to those recordings, and a warning: do not adjust your television picture. Now, my tape recorder is down by the tomb. What family is this?
This is the tomb of the Waldegrave family, who were associated with the area for many years, and there's a possibility that one of this family is the origin of the figure who's been described as a ghost nun.
How can a Waldegrave be a A nun?
Well, the figure has been described as having a veiled headdress, and it's not certain that she's a nun. Also, this tomb has been the scene of a number of inexplicable incidents. People have heard the sound of earth falling, of raps and taps, and even are some reports of some of the pillars moving. I'm not too happy about that.
Well, maybe this is what we have on this tape. And I'll play it to you now, and we'll see if Mr. Toon Hollingworth got anything like you were talking about.
Our investigation was to be carried out in the church, and we came armed with tape recorders. We left the 2 recorders running on their own inside the building. Before locking the machines in, we searched the building. This session proved to be the most exciting one, for we firmly believe we recorded the sound of a ghost stepping forward and opening something which sounds like a door. At first, we thought we'd recorded the sound of the chancel door being opened, so we investigated this possibility. But neither of these sounds in any way seems to match the ghostly one. Nothing in the vicinity of the altar that we could find could account for the strange recording. We were so intrigued by these events that we returned to the church the following Saturday and spent the entire night there. Having searched the building once more, we locked the machines in. And already the atmosphere seemed to be changing. 2 of the team said they felt they were being watched by somebody. Now follows the most remarkable sound of all. For quite clearly, the centre microphone picked up what obviously is a human sigh. After this, we decided to break the sequence of visits and to try again during summer conditions. We started recording about 1 a.m., and the first tapes revealed the natural ambience of the building and nothing else. But as we entered the church at about 1:45, we all felt a change in atmosphere. I had a definite tingle pulsing through my body, and a feeling as though a presence were pressing against my back. And yet, there was nothing horrific about it. We felt certain, however, that this run would produce results, and we were right. It's the most surprising sound we've heard to date, and we were able to locate it as originating just in front of the altar rail. If there is anybody in this church who is trying to communicate with us, we'd be grateful if you would try and do something tonight. Perhaps you could give us some indication of how we can help you. At about 3:20 in the morning, we picked up the sound of faint rapping. The team made another random visit at the end of August. A watch was kept throughout the night on the chancel door, and this proved worthwhile, for in the small hours a glow was observed around the door, as though a phosphorescent aura were emanating. On this occasion, the church produced yet another sound. This ended with a rather more frightening sigh. For the 5th visit, it was decided to keep the church manned with observers throughout the entire night. On previous occasions, we'd obtained the best results by leaving the equipment locked inside on its own, and we wondered whether the human presence might have some adverse effect on conditions. At about 4:10 in the morning, 3 of us kept watch on the choir stall adjacent to the altar. This was to be a memorable and frightening occasion. For most of the period, there were odd clicks and taps generated in the area of the font. But as it was extremely dark, we could see nothing. Then we began to see tiny points of light hovering on the curtain behind the font and on one of the pews about a quarter of the way down the church. At first, we thought we couldn't believe our own eyes, and each one of us thought we were suffering from fatigue, until we broke the silence to speak about it.
I think I must be getting tired and I keep seeing things.
And Jerry, are you watching Peter with the curtain?
In the pews, the first few pews.
Yes, that's where I'm seeing them. I do my
It lights up the floor as well. Oh, it flashes on and off, a big story, really.
Yes, I saw one just then too.
The main one is up in the curtain. Eh? On the right-hand side, right in the curtain.
Very curious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, there's one up here again, then.
Yeah.
No, you're not seeing things, Peter. The three of us can see them, so it obviously exists, whatever it is. It's a strange phenomenon. It's stripped this time, isn't it? It's stripped. Now, that was fantastic. We've no idea what that was. It certainly made all of us jump. As though some object had been thrown down. It's curious that that seemed to have been tied up, but you're getting colder and colder. It's like a build-up of power. After a while, we realised the lights were coming closer to us. But although we stuck our ground, there were no further audible disturbances in the church, and the lights eventually vanished. As to what they mean, it's anybody's guess. But whatever they are physical. The microphones prove that.
Would you say that, well, as an expert, that these are things that are happening outside that people are observing, or that they're things that they are projecting from their own minds and think they're seeing?
Well, there I really go back to this atmospheric photograph theory. See, if we don't know really, but it may be that all our thoughts, all our actions may be recorded on some sort of eternal tape. And under certain conditions, maybe climatic conditions, maybe in the presence of certain people, occasionally they reappear. We just don't know. I don't honestly think that the figures that are seen represent an afterlife. I think it's much more likely that it's some kind of echo of a previous life.
I hope you've enjoyed your wander around the church with myself and Tim, and perhaps we may have been lucky enough to have captured perhaps some odd EVP or some kind of psychic phenomena which didn't appear before our eyes as we were investigating this beautiful building. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you've enjoyed this brief interlude to the legend of Borley Church. As you can see, the church and the land around it is really, really beautiful. There is a lot of deep-rooted antipathy between the people that live in the village and visitors that go to the church, and I can assure you it's perfectly understandable. There have been occasions there where people have become bored and they've started throwing stones at people's windows, also at the church, or even attempting to break into the church, as on one occasion. Also, of course, on another occasion, another group decided to go across the road to a farm and start to annoy the animals in pens which were kept there at that point. And so it continues, and it is sad because there are a lot of decent, genuine paranormal investigators who go to Borley Church who never ever cause any problems or any issues. But I really feel that if the church authorities gave us permission at least one night to carry out an independent examination of the church, if you like a revamp from the earlier investigation in 1975, then it might, in a way, allay a lot of people's concerns about what type of activity exists there, and more importantly, would satisfy a lot of people's interests. Not everybody can afford to get to Borley Church, particularly if you're living abroad, and even in living in the UK, petrol isn't cheap. So if there was somebody independently that could do this and who could share this, it would satisfy a lot of people's interests. But sad to say, the church would never ever do that. Not in 1 million years would they allow ghost hunters to go inside sacred ground such as a church and carry out their own paranormal investigation. Fortunately, not everybody that shares religious beliefs thinks that way, but unfortunately, those that are in control of these buildings generally, should we say, err to the side of caution when dealing with ghost hunters, and so they won't allow us anywhere inside their churches at night. But it doesn't mean to say that we can't visit during the daytime, as I did here, in an attempt to pick up activity. Anyway, I'm starting to digress slightly. Let's move along now. Each month I share with you a ghostly legend, and here is my report for this month, which actually comes from my own village of Silver End near Whittam in Essex. On the series of my ghost legends, a while ago somebody sent me a photograph, Andy Radley in fact, who lives in the same village as myself, which is Silver End, who was sent a photograph by a friend who took a photograph by the lake where I'm actually standing. And in this picture you'll see what appears to be a light image of horsemen. Now obviously, again, it's just like e.v.p. and with any other type of paranormal activity that's captured to camera, it's always a question of interpretation. But when I look at this photograph, I can see horsemen, I can see knights, I can see a shield. And according to Andy, this particular lake, originally it was excavated in the 20s for sand to build the village I live in. Originally was a trackway which led to Cressing Temple, and Cressing Temple was the headquarters of the Knights Templar in England. Unfortunately there today very little remains other than 2 barns that they erected, but this photograph intrigues me. Is this just another form of pareidolia where you're looking at an image and your brain is translating it into a shape that's acceptable, or is this in fact a photograph of some ghostly knights returning to Cressing Temple? That was very interesting. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get hold of the guy who took the photograph to come with me down to the scene and show me exactly where it was taken. I can only work out an approximate whereabouts of where the shot was taken, but I do know it was taken at 7:30 p.m. on a September evening. So perhaps later this year I may go back to the pit site in September and carry out my own nighttime investigation, and you never know, I may be lucky enough to pick up images of these ghostly knights. That's certainly a very interesting story, and my thanks to you, Andy Radley, for bringing it to my attention initially. Here is a new feature on the show. A few weeks ago I left a message on my Facebook page asking people to write to me if they have any questions or concerns about the paranormal, and if they wish to have anonymity, I'm quite happy to provide that. And on this occasion I have, because I've actually received the same question about 5 times, in addition to others which will be featured again during next month's show. The question that seems to be on many people's lips is this: if I wanted to investigate the paranormal, what have I got to do? Well, I've actually shared quite a few videos and also written a number of articles on how to do your own paranormal investigation. However, I will share with you this. What you need to start off with is something very, very basic, such as a tape recorder, and the emphasis is on the word tape. The digital variety don't seem to be very good at picking up electronic voice phenomena. My advice is to use an old tape recorder and to go to a part of your home or business or whatever location you're going to, and ask a specific question: who are you? And allow 30 seconds to remain before asking the next question. And if there is any electronic voice phenomena, you may be lucky and you may elicit a response, because sometimes they do actually reply to you. And if you carry this on for some minutes, asking relevant questions to the location you're at, you might be able to elicit some kind of spectral response. Now, say for example that the location, you did your e.v.p, and it certainly appears to be haunted. There are other equipment that you can buy, or perhaps you may already have it. For example, a camcorder would be useful, a torch for sure, a flashlight, and also a digital still camera. Digital stills are particularly good at picking up light anomalies, perhaps more so than a conventional camcorder. But the downside to using a digital still camera is that it creates huge flashes of light, which sometimes can have a reverse effect on a particular investigation. So you've really got to judge this according to your knowledge of the locale that you're actually investigating. Now, if you're going to use a camcorder, the best thing to go for is the earlier analogs, if you can find them, and they should be available on sites such as eBay. The analog camcorders sell for around 60 to 70 pounds each, and they use Hi8 videotapes. And the downside to analog is that you're only going to get audio on one side of the signal, but you can also find the very earliest digital camcorders of that ilk that use Hi8 tapes. So they're large bulky cameras like the earlier Hi8s are, which means that they have, if they have zero night shot capability, that's zero lux capability, which means they can shoot in the dark. If they have that, then what you're going to see is going to be 10 times better than you will ever see with a modern DV camcorder. And the reason for this is quite simple, is that the more recent camcorders have become smaller and smaller in size, and so for the extras, like for example the infrared sensors, they become a luxury item, which then becomes a possible add-on if you're prepared to pay the extra for it, but has very little worth. They're very much smaller, and of course they generate a much smaller degree of light. So for example, if you're using a DV camcorder, you'll probably pick up anything within a range of 5 to 10 feet. But if you're using an analog or early digital DV camcorder that uses Hi8 tapes, then the range is going to be considerably much bigger. And with the addition of a special add-on infrared light, it can go up many times above that. I mean, the actual range of it is quite vast. You may be talking 40 or 50 or maybe 60 feet with the right type of light, which might be a bit too strong if you're videoing inside a small building. But these type of lights are very useful if you're shooting outdoors or in a much larger building, such as a large hall, for example. I've read obviously about other types of equipment that people can buy, for example ghost boxes. I don't have any great store by them. I've actually shared my skepticism on the ability of these devices to record paranormal activity based upon a question and answer format. I have been with people when they've had these boxes and used them, and they've picked up sounds which could relate to virtually anything which they can tie a story to, so as though they are being communicated by spirit who is answering their direct questions. I mean, I've actually heard, for example, they were convinced that the spirit was talking to the person who was answering the question. His name was Dave, but it sounded nothing like Dave to me. All this is, literally, it's just random radio signals, which occasionally the pointer stops and picks up a word. The view from paranormal investigators and ghost hunters, not all, thank God, is that these devices are actually being controlled by spirit, and every time spirit stops on a particular word, that word is part of a response to a question or statement. I don't personally believe in it, and I know that quite a few people do, and they spend quite a lot of money on the different variants that you can buy, but for real basic paranormal investigation, there is nothing better than your own senses. Really and truthfully, when you're standing there in the dark and you know that there are things going on around you, you can really chew into it, you can really draw through that, and that sometimes aids what you capture on other devices. We can all do this. I'm not a specially gifted person, I am just the same as anybody else, but I've opened myself much more closely to spirit, and I'm sure that you in time could do the same. Never ever say no. I haven't yet reached the limitation of how far I can go with anything, and I don't think you can either. It's the amount of will that you're prepared to put into it that achieves the results at the end of the day. Anyway, enough said on that, and let's move across now to our special feature. And yes, it's a return trip to a very famous building. Well, tonight we returned back to the ancient church, the one that sits on the edge of the Essex marshes, looking out forlornly into the North Sea, completely isolated and some distance away from the nearest housing. This stands remote and abandoned in field. But what a fantastic building this really is. 1,350 years old, and we are here tonight to investigate it again. I'm so excited. This is a really wonderful place to be, and I'm pleased that you've decided to join us. That's myself and of course Deanne. Say hello, Deanne.
Hello.
A little girly hello.
Hello.
Anyway, let's continue with the investigation, and let's keep our fingers crossed that we pick up something worth sharing. We come in love, light and peace, and I hope that all friendly spirits of this building will communicate with us. Up by the window to the left was a big red flash. Is yours not on? Push your finger in that. Yeah.
You know when this wasn't a church?
What, when it was used as a barn?
Yeah, I'm being shown a fire.
Really?
Mm.
By whom?
By 2 or 3 men. 2 or 3 men are fighting. And was there straw?
Well, yeah, it was used as a barn.
There was another level built on top of this. There's a fight. I can see. I've just had this picture image in my head of 2 men, bearded men, having a fight.
I'll tell you what I'm picking up at the moment. I'm picking up quite a lot of people, and they are above us, and they are looking down upon us, as they always do when we come in here. And they're always filled with idle curiosity as to why we are here and what our purpose or intentions are. And when I talk of a number of people, a lot of people, so what you're experiencing could well be part of that same package. But I'm not actually seeing any one individual or individuals. I'm just feeling this as a collective of human consciousness that pervades inside this beautiful building. Oh, a really strange smell, a really old smell. It smells like, Deanne, it's a really old smell. It's just come across me. It smells like herbs, but very old herbs. It's a very sweet, sickly smell. It's probably like an old perfume, and I can just see a light down there. I can smell it around me. Who are you? And it feels very cold here, very cold. It's a woman, it's female.
Yeah, as soon as I walked in here, I had I don't know, I felt a woman with a bonnet.
A young girl, and I can see her now, probably about maybe between, I don't know, 16 and 20, very small, very slim, long black hair that goes down her back, very petite, and she's wearing an all-in-one blue dress, which is very plain. And the period, I suppose, and her clothing could really fit a number of periods, but distinctly medieval, maybe before. The smell's gone now. It was a really sweet, musky smell. It was a pleasant smell. It wasn't a horrible one. It's back again. Come and sit over here and see if you can pick up with it. Yeah. It just keeps coming over in waves. It's a really pleasant smell. For those of you that are watching, you can probably hear this noise in the background. It's actually a very strong gale, and the building we're in is not surrounded by other buildings, and it's completely exposed to the North Sea, and that's what you're hearing, is the wind coming in across the North Sea. Where our equipment is based on this table, and we can hear a kind of clicking noise that's coming from there. The only equipment that's actually working on there at the moment is a camcorder, which is just linked to wireless for audio, not for video. And of course it doesn't use tapes, it stores onto an SD card. I just need to attenuate my eyes to the darkness. Uh-oh. Did you hear a click? That's a camera there, I haven't touched it. Okay, if somebody did that deliberately, could you do that again, please? If you're trying to communicate. Oh, I didn't expect anyone would. Ah! Just see a light flash down on the ground to my left. Just came from my other camera rig all the way down here. They're about, they're around us. They're definitely, oops, so it proves I'm in the dark. They're definitely around us.
There's nothing unpleasant in here, like there has been in the past.
But I can feel a creepiness about the place.
Can you? Today?
Yeah. It's more mischievous than nasty. It's not unpleasant. Something flashed across that window. That window again. It just went black for a second. That's happened before, and then activities occurred. there is a lot going on in here. It's like a kind of magic, and it's slowly building up. I'm seeing lights shooting across the ground, hearing strange noises, and on one occasion the window at the top was completely blacked out, which has happened before, which is this huge shadow that's been recorded here. This is getting very, very interesting now. I'm just hoping that somebody in spirit who's friendly enough and decent enough and warm enough is prepared to make some level of contact. At this point, we decided on a short break outside while leaving the camcorders to run in our absence, although nothing was discovered on camera during this period. But it was on our return that this very interesting EVP was captured. This is probably one of the creepiest churches I've ever been into, but it probably won't be the last. But it's also one of my favourites. You've got to have respect for a building that's 1,350 years old. Just seen, again, you're over there, I'm looking up here, and I thought I saw strands of vapour going up. Well, okay, it's been a very interesting evening tonight. Perhaps it hasn't been as active on the surface that on other occasions has proved to be very interesting. But even so, I'm certain that we've picked something up. I just smell a bad smell now. Earlier we were picking up a very, very pleasant smell, and I believe it was a young girl. When I say young, between say 16 and 20, and of some vintage. But now I've just smelled this very unpleasant smell go past. I've seen light forms inside the church. I saw one of the windows completely blacked out by shadows. It covered it completely. And I've been hearing constantly whispering. And I've seen one or two light anomalies flashing around as well. So I'm fairly hopeful that we've got something worth sharing with you tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that more or less concludes this month's edition of the Haunted Earth Show. I hope that you've enjoyed it and the stuff that I've been able to share with you. And I'm certain that for next month, in the month of April, we have got something very, very special to film and share with you. I won't reveal any details yet. We'll just wait and see. And as always, my fingers are crossed, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.